Welcome to Project CB. I've got Father Patrick with me, and he's quickly going to explain what this day is all about. Father.
This is the day of the launch of a book I wrote some time ago, and we're making it, I suppose, public for the first time. Lindy Chavango has been the organizer, and she's the driver behind me. This day wasn't to happen, but she pushed it, and she said, "Get out there and have a launch." And it's a book based on my experience. It's the second book in a number of books I wrote, but this is based on my experiences of this particular area south of Johannesburg called the Vaal Triangle, and the events, many of them unknown to people, the events that made not only local headlines or national headlines, but even, as I will mention today, world headlines. And it seemed to me, hey, if such important things happened in my sight, in my presence, maybe, this should be written down and put into words. People write for lesser reasons. And these were world events that I experienced with my own eyes, especially when I was working in the peripheral townships, or the black townships of this area south of Johannesburg called the Vaal Triangle. It's an area full of history yet to be written. So I'm part of that. I'm helping to write a little bit of history throughout the place. It's not the end. It's only the beginning. It's to inspire, I guess, other people, young people, to talk about their experiences of the events I described, because they all have their own stories. They all saw these things, so many thousands here saw these events from their perspective, and each perspective is important, is valuable, it's part of the whole history, and so it's exciting, but there is as I'm speaking now, there are words in the book of Revelations which say to the effect, what you have seen, write what you have seen. And I'm writing what I have seen. And I suppose by this venture also encouraging young people that they too should write what they see. And even write about the events I speak about, to enlarge, to expand them, and to make them better known to their children's children, because the young people of the future will always want to know what happened these times, what happened in the 70s, 80s and 90s. They will just be fascinated by our history. Like the young people of any country in the world, each country has their own history, their own turmoil and their own joys and experiences. And many of them will be having good experiences during the World Cup, or the Rugby World Cup, now beginning today in Japan. So we in South Africa, we had the 2010 World Cup, and I have a story there. I mention that because today the Rugby World Cup is starting in Japan. And, even these sports events become part of the local history. And I have a chapter in that from another perspective, a different type of perspective. And, well, I guess one would have to read it to find out. But, I mean, it's full of events that happened here. The book is full of experiences and perceptions and lots of history. Even though I'm not a professional history, it's full of stories from the ground up rather than from the top down. It's a book written by people, not by academics, to instruct us. Well, I would like to think it will instruct people from the experiences of other people, And yes, the book it brings people, to the Palestine, to the footsteps of Christ. I have a story in that because I worked there in the archaeological sites, and so therefore I said, hey, this is amazing. And I'm comparing this to South Africa and the archaeological sites where Christ lived. And for Peter and Andrew and some of the disciples and their families lived. I lived there. And so therefore I had access to these excavations and access into the life and times of Christ. And it was so powerful that I said, wow, I'm going to write this story. Get all the guidebooks. You know, Israel is full of guidebooks. Palestine is full of guidebooks, full of millions of visitors. And they used to come to the sites where I was working at, not as an archaeologist, but as a church person, member of the Franciscan order, who were given the instructions by the Pope 700 years ago to please look after the sites, preserve the holy sites, the places where Jesus walked and breathed and talked and preached and suffered his, death and resurrection. So that my order was asked to look after those places many hundreds of years ago and still do today. And so therefore I had special access into the very places of biblical places. And I have a story on that. I reconstruct a day in the life of Jesus. So if nobody ever went to Palestine or the Holy Land, they'd find themselves there if they read that section. I've also sections on you would probably know by my accent that I'm not Afrikaner. I'm even not South African, but I've been here for the last, 40 years or 45 years. So I'm a citizen now. But I do have impressions in the book as a person outside South Africa, looking back on their country of birth, you see. And I also have insights on the intercultural communication, the cultures of the world, where, for us as a Christian church minister, as a priest, God is to be found in all cultures. It's up to us to find him. Because he's the God of cultures. Absolutely. And the God of peoples. Yeah. Do you see? And so he's there. He cannot be absent. He's there. It's up to us to open our minds and to find out and reach out.
So, Father Patrick, I'm very excited about this book launch. We're going to have a snippet of you presenting the book launch as well.
Oh yeah, I guess I'll say a few words.
Yes. So thank you so much for your time.
We're finished, that's good.
Yeah, it's a quick one. So that is the Township God for Patrick Noonen. So thank you so much, Father.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you. A pleasure.
The ability to practice his faith at the same time respecting and affirming the uniqueness and freedom of other people. Such an attitude springs from his assurance that our God is the creator of the whole universe, and that he has not left us without witness at any time or any place, even in Everton or Singapore. That is the story in the Township God. Thank you very much.
He managed, in the 80s, he made about 10 efforts to have me arrested. At least 10. Calling me to dangerous meetings, which were normally surrounded by the army, the police, or the security branch at the corner, with the cars, with the antenna, 5 antenna to a security police van. And he would invite me with a smile to the meeting, knowing that we were being filmed. And the films were going into the archives in Pretoria. So finally he succeeded. I was arrested, and we were put on trial. And in fact, that story appears in the book. What happened? But he was really an instigator. I have to tell you that. He was an instigator of change. A dangerous man, like Malindi over here. I'm not sure who was the most dangerous.
No, he was most dangerous.
Was he the most dangerous? But Dina is now serving the community and the country in the legal profession in Johannesburg. So yes, I want to thank the Mayor for coming along here and being with us today. As I say, we've been a long time together. I also must thank African Flavour Books and Mrs. Hilapi for providing the venue here for us today and making it possible. And they're such an exciting couple. They want people to read and tell their stories, local stories. My books are local stories, but they are there to stimulate others, younger people, to tell their stories, because the Val Triangle is saturated with stories yet to be written. So thank you, Ndati Hilapi and Ma Hilapi, for what you've done and what you are doing for the Val Triangle, the rise of writers. And you might have seen in the newspapers recently, we don't have writers much, and we have less, maybe less readers too. Some say, okay, people are beginning to read. They are. But during the riots in Johannesburg there recently, one hawker, he was a hawker of books, decided he didn't need to run any place. He said, nobody will take my books. That's a little sort of, I heard that on the radio. So he stood still. His stand was all right, because nobody was interested in doing anything about his books, So this is, So thank you, Ndati Hilapi and Ma Hilapi, for making for making books possible and central and close to people, and causing people and enabling people to question, to write, to think and reflect on their own lives. And I would also like to thank another troublemaker, that's Lindy Shabango, because she cajoled me, shouted at me, forced me to try to have this book launch. I didn't intend to have a book launch. I wasn't feeling so well, and she heard about it, and she started emailing me. I think 4,000 emails I got, and Google are upset. Google are complaining. Well, she's cramming the lines with her emails, trying to get me to agree that yes, there should be a book launch, and yes, people should know their own stories, and yes, we should take the opportunity to stimulate other people's. As somebody said, readers are leaders. So thank you, Lindy, for all of the trouble you gave me. I'd like also to thank the Joko Tea Bottle Store. Joko Tea Bottle Store. Is that the shop opposite Upilung? Is that right? Okay. Well, if you're in there sometime, would you thank them for the drop of alcohol, or the cool drinks, or whatever, or the water? Would you sort of, when you're passing that way, say thank you for enabling people to come together here at Ndati Hilapi's place. And also to thank everybody else here. I forget people's names very easily. As somebody, it's terrible to say to a priest, do you remember me? Do you remember me 25 years ago? And I have already to remember 6,000 people, and as somebody said, mental yaka ichatese. So, mental yaka ichatese. Anyway, there we go. So I'd like to also mention the donors. Somebody offered a few rand to pay for some of the other things here, and thank you for that. They don't want to be named. People. I have people appearing in the book are from Everton. part of the book is about ordinary people talking about themselves, expressing their ideas, their concerns, because I think there comes a time when we have to allow ordinary people to talk about their passions and emotions and feelings about life. And there's a section of the book about that. And it indicates where people were at before 1994 in their words. It's a cameo of people in the townships coming to me, sitting down, chatting about things, and the ordinary people are what's called small people that nobody thinks about. I'd like to also thank Professor Musweo he's here. Professor, where are you? Right there in the corner from St. Augustine's, who was at the launch of another book, where I launched that book about racism. Help my granny's dog is a racist, and of course he was one of the organisers of that day was none other than Oba. Where are Oba in yellow? She helped with the launch of the book on racism from Boxford. And once again, Oba, thank you. You were great. The book here, now there's a few ideas I'd like to share with you about it. In the book, I wanted to bring the Val Triangle to the world, and the world to the Val Triangle, if that makes sense. So therefore, as the mayor said, I have things about other countries in it, but I connect them with the Val. I have things about, let's say, for example, Lesotho, when a Roman Catholic priest was deported from Everton in 1970, and the story of his battle with the security branch, and they followed him to the mountains of Lesotho to make sure he had left not only South Africa, but the southern Africa, because the security branch didn't want him near South Africa, never mind in South Africa. So I thought that was a story worth remembering, Father Peter Shanahan. And other stories I have, there are stories when you talk about London, that's about South African security branch planning to kill Dirk Coetzee using hired Irish killers from the north of Ireland. I thought it was interesting to remember that. It's unknown. It's unknown stuff by the former security police. And that was happening while the security police, the army first came into the townships in the history of South Africa. That's when they came in, as we know, in the Val Triangle in 1984. That was the first time the army came into townships. And at the same time, they were, the SADF were buying arms from the Israelis who had confiscated them from the Palestinians and sold them to terrorists in the north of Ireland. I mean, these are the little things that happen that most people wouldn't know about. So I put that story in because it's interesting. The conniving that goes on in the shadowy areas of foreign policy. Mayor talked about it. Township God. Why the name? Actually, it had about 4 names. I started off with calling it From Johannesburg to Jerusalem. That was the original name of the book. Then I gave up that after a while. Then I decided, what about God in the birthplace of humanity? Now, okay, so Johannesburg and South Africa is the birthplace of humanity. So talking about God in that situation, that's okay. So that was okay for about a year. Then I got bored. So maybe I better change it. And from the cradle, then the 4th title it got was From the Cradle of Humanity to the Cradle of Christianity. Africa is the cradle of humanity. And in the book, I was going to the east. That's Palestine and those countries over there. That's the cradle of Christianity. So, I thought that was interesting. From the cradle of humanity to the cradle of Christianity. And then showing, because Christianity is actually an Eastern religion, which came from the East to the rest of the world. It's not a European religion, it's an Eastern religion, because the props, the place where Christ came, was over in the Middle East, which was the crossroads of the world at the time, 2,000 years ago. And after all, many biblical figures were from Africa, such as Moses and the flight in Egypt. They were all, that was the Ethiopian coming from Jerusalem to Ethiopia, or coming from Jerusalem home to, deep in Africa, where this possibly the Congo was here. So, and the fact that the Holy Family lived in Africa for 3 years. So that meant I had to relate it to the Middle East. And I went there. And then I worked and lived in the excavations where they excavated, they were excavating the homes of the disciples and where Jesus lived. And I found that the excavations there, the homes were nice square little houses, like RDP houses. And I said to myself, hey, Jesus lived in an RDP house. I thought that was nice connection, do you see? In fact, I have it here. That you could say, this is Everton, a yard holding, the houses in the yards in Everton. You go into a yard, there's about 10 houses, right? Or RDP. Well, actually, this is a house where Jesus lived. This is excavated. This is the homes where people lived at the time of Jesus. Now, I'm not giving you copies of this. There's only one copy in South Africa. There is only one copy in South Africa, so I'm not letting it go. But it's a reconstructed homes of where Peter and the apostles, the type of homes they lived in. And I thought, wow, they like RDP houses. So I included it in, I put it in. Also in the book, there's something about the 2010 the 2010 World Cup. Yes, there's something in there. Remember, we had to. The mayor organised that, and he asked me to speak on it, and to speak about getting the 2010 Soccer World Cup for South Africa. And I was wondering, what will I speak about? What do you say? You're asking God. You're almost trying to manipulate God. Hey, God, we want it. And God mightn't agree, you see. And then I did mention that, Tunisia and Egypt, they were also looking for the 2010 World Cup. And I said, the Muslims are also praying that Allah gets the World Cup for them in Egypt and in Tunisia at the same time as we're asking. We're asking for the World Cup here. The mayor can laugh now, but I had to say it. All right, so these are then, okay, there's some stuff in it of the more darker side. Remember the controversies of Satanism in the schools. And all this uproar, the education department, principals were in turmoil. And, well, when Mayor Gift was in the SACC, he contacted me to sort of write up and prepare documentation. Is that correct? No. Documentation on is it real or is it not? Is it fantasy or is it diabolical? So that was. I'm sure the mayor would have lots to say about that. But I just put some in the book because it's our lives. It's our experiences. Then obviously it's not a commercial book. This was not published by the big publishing people because they're not interested in the Val Triangle, and they're not interested in stories of the small people or the ordinary people. And so I had to beg and cajole and try to get the money and get it published anyway, even if we didn't have a launch. But then Lindy came along and it all changed. So I think we have to. It's important for us people in the Val Triangle to realize we have a heritage we have a history, and we better not forget it. And I'll finish off now by just giving you 10 areas where the Val Triangle featured in the world news, all over the world, in the 1980s to the 1990s, or after that. And these are 10 areas that maybe we tend to forget. But they're 10 areas that changed the history of South Africa. That's the more important thing to remember. We changed the history of South Africa, whether we like it or not. So number one is the Sharpeville, we all know this one, the Sharpeville Massacre of 1960. That went all over the world. The uprising of 84, when 93 students went on strike and 70 people were killed on the streets of the townships, which I have recorded in the other book, their names and addresses of those people, which are recorded at the back of their burning the churches. I'm not sure whether those families still know that their deceased members are recorded. So that's number two. Number one was remembering the Sharpeville Massacre, we know that. Number two, the uprising of 1984. Number three, the Sharpeville trial. The Sharpeville 6. That went viral. Well, was it viral that time? But it went viral. Went all over the world. And it triggered off disinvestment and sanctions, and finally contributed to a new South Africa. Number four, the Delmas trial. That changed history, and that originated here. Advocate Malindi, of course, could give a whole course on that. He could tell you the inside story of that. Number five, the Buipatong Massacre. That went viral, known all over the world. And it's good to know that. Number six, the South African army invading all the townships of the Val Triangle. That hadn't happened before. That was world news. And it was world news. Number seven, the Val Triangle rent boycott, which finally wore down resistance by the government. The Val Triangle, that was what we would call non-violent resistance, although this expression wouldn't have been used. But in church and theological circles, it would be used. Non-violent resistance. That was and that was through the influence of the Val Minister Solidarity Group. The way the ministers were able to comprehend what was happening and see beyond the hill, where most people saw the ground. The Val Minister Solidarity Group had a vision for that period, which unfolded piece by piece, bit by bit, during the 10 years of 1980 to the release of Nelson Mandela. Am I correct? Yeah. And then number nine, the church expose. For the first time, the churches revealed the brutality of the South African police and published a booklet on it in the late 80s, which it was published both in the Netherlands and in Johannesburg simultaneously, in case they expected it to be banned immediately in Johannesburg. So it was simultaneously published in Holland by the Catholic Bishops' Conference to make sure that the world knew what was happening on the ground in the Val Triangle. And finally, number 10, now of course, in between there you had a whole host of massacres, of which Temba, of course, represents one. Temba Nangalembe over there at the back, the Nangalembe massacre in Zone 7. But finally, number 10, this was the, you possibly have never heard of the International Freedom Foundation, the IFF. They were a group of right-wing whites in Johannesburg who falsified a document of 5 pages condemning the clergy of the Val Triangle. Then they picked 2 people, one from deep in Everton, who we never found out who they were, and one was from sort of a Zulu pastor from deep in KwaZulu-Natal. Natal. They gave them this five-page document full of lies, and went over to Washington, to the what's the other party there? Not the Democrats. Who's the other party in Washington? The Republicans. They gave it to the Republicans and said, these clergy in the Val Triangle, they are bringing communism to the hearts of the people, and they're being paid by Moscow. And they're saying the clergy are telling people to go and shoot people and kill people, especially kill the whites. Now, maybe you're hearing that for the first time. We knew it since the late 80s. I found it indirectly from some lawyers in Johannesburg who traced the document to Washington and got me a copy of the 5-page document. That document is in there, burning the churches at the back. It's one of these, Anyway, there we go, brothers and sisters. Thank you very. Hey, sorry, this is not the church. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
So welcome to Project CB, and today we are at the launch of Father Patrick Noonen's book, Township God. The funny thing, well, not the funny thing, the miracle part of it is that it is all dedicated to our current mayor, Reverend Gift Moerane. And he is here with us today. Reverend, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and I'm so excited to sit here to be hosted by the owners of this place, and especially to receive the honor from Father Patrick to receive this book dedicated to my life and ministry.
So, life and ministry, and it's such a dynamic and huge thing. For me, it's like, how do you take this history, this dynamic history, and put it into a book? As we know, the sad reality is that our people in the Val do not read.
Yeah, that's the dilemma that we are facing. But for those who can read, the best way to relate the story is to organize community dialogues where you share stories. Like tomorrow, I'll be sharing a story about the burning the churches, the role of the church in the 80s. So that's the only way you can entice people to gain interest, to also look around and say, I need that copy for myself. So what we need, I think the purpose of launching the book today, what the revelation today is for me is those who can tell the story about the book itself, they are the ones who can enable society to read more. So the secret of launching a book actually is to put it in the public space and getting people who can act like ambassadors of the message in that book. And if you are able to narrate the story very well, more people actually will go around and look for the copy, because the narrator of the story would have enticed them to say, I would like to know more about what is happening. I just actually browsed this book, but I was able to understand what Father Patrick wanted to say when he talks of Township God. Then it talks to me, it talks to my neighbors, it talks to ordinary people walking in the streets. So that's the only way that others can gain interest and say, oh, what is this story about the Township God? We know God always related to cathedrals, chapels, vestries, and so on and so on. So today, the book says, no, there is God in the township. So somebody must go and tell people and entice people to say, I want to understand this God who walks around in the township.
So what would be your core message for the Val today as we launch this book by Father Patrick Noonen, Township God? What is your message as Reverend Gift Moerane and as the mayor?
The message is that around the world, when you travel, the world can go to Asia, you go to Europe. What makes people to visit countries is history. We all visit countries, other parts of the world, because of history, because of information we read somewhere. So I would say places like this, galleries like this, if schools around the world can be encouraged to send students, learners here, to come to spend at least an hour to read, they will actually know about their environment, they will know about where they come from, and they will also gain interest to express themselves like children in other communities who are also able to write books. It's surprising today that young people can write books themselves, but it takes one to read so that one can say, I will also want to write my own book so that people can read. So I would like to encourage the people of the world to say, if in the corners of our chapels, our vestries, cathedrals, we can have bookshelves, or information about books, shops like this, encourage congregations to read. There are Bible books here. I've just picked up 2 copies for myself because you read the Bible, then you move inside the bookshop, you see something about a chapter in the Bible. If you are a committed person, you will also want to know how is this writer exploring about these disciples of Jesus Christ. So storytelling, preachers who can preach quoting books, because unless our preachers can also be readers themselves, so that when you preach, you can also narrate the story of what supports your message, which book you have read. So some preachers that just preach, they read the Bible without referring to other books. And there are wonderful books where you can refer and say, I read this author. This is how this author talks about God. In that way, you are encouraging members of your congregation to go to say, I would like to get a copy of that book. So preachers themselves should be readers. That's why I like the Catholics, because everywhere where you go, you'll find a library in their names. So that itself, actually, it is a sign of encouraging people to read. So we used to read Father's books in his office, and that's how we gain interest to know more about what Catholicism means. But if he was not reading, he would not have encouraged us by quoting certain authors to also go and search for those books and read. So preachers actually can do that. But unfortunately, we've got preachers today who only read verses and then they move around verses without actually going in deep into the verse that they are reading to quote other books which were written centuries ago. So I think that's the way I can encourage preachers actually to promote reading. Quote other books when you prepare your sermon. That's the only way you can make your followers to understand the importance of reading.
Welcome back to Project CB, and today we are speaking to a beautiful, beautiful lady. She looks young. She looks like she's about 12, but she says that she is from the Embassy of Ireland.
That's right. I am from the Embassy of Ireland. So part of my work at the Embassy is on our cultural engagement and our diaspora engagement. So we were very happy to be invited along to the book launch today. The Irish missionaries are a very special group among our Irish in South Africa, our Irish diaspora. And it's lovely to be here today for the launch of Father Patrick's book.
Well, there you have it. So tell us your name, where you from originally in Ireland.
So my name is Louisa Heenahan. It's a difficult one to pronounce. And I come from a small town called Foxford in the west of Ireland.
Okay. Do you miss home?
I miss the people at home. But I'm very happy to be in South Africa. I feel very privileged to be here and to be working here, and I've met some wonderful, wonderful people, and really enjoying my time here.
How long have you been in South Africa?
Oh, just over a year now. Just over a year. Okay. Yeah, and I'll be staying for a couple of years.
Oh, great. More invites to come.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that's the little quick chat that we had with Louise. So, welcome back to Project CB. Carlette, being the fabulous journalist as always, is bringing us just absolutely amazing people to chat to today. And right here, I've got a gentleman who will tell us who he is and why he's at Township God. Good afternoon and welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to say a few words. My name is Cllr Malindi.
And where do you hail from and why are you here today?
Well, I grew up in the Vaal, Zone 13 in particular. I am here at this book launch because Father Patrick Noonen played a very important role in the 1980s when I was a political activist in the area. And whenever there's an occasion to pay tribute to him, I make myself available. And I'm here because this book that he has, the latest book that he has written, means a lot to the people of the Vaal and the people of the world.
We know that a lot of people don't read, but what would you say is the core message from this township book that will encourage people to go out and get it?
I have not read the book yet, but I randomly opened page 138, and immediately it reflected what Father Patrick is about, where he talks of a story related by his father when he came from Rome after his ordination, that is Father Patrick's ordination. And he was marveling about the buildings and the history of Rome, and his companion, who happened to be an Indian, of Indian origin, indicated to him that they have greater buildings and cathedrals that predate Christianity, that predate Rome. So the message from the book, and I think that's the reason why everyone must read the book, is that if you seek the answers to the problems of the world has sought always to answer those questions, and the presence of God exists in every nation and in every community. It's the message that differs. It's how the message is delivered. But Father Patrick's mission in this book is to say God exists everywhere, and we all seek answers to the same problems and the same questions through seeking that spiritual leader in us. Okay. And Christ is that leader for many people and exists in many other religions.
So there you have it from Advocate Malindi.